Welcome to the Troubadour channel. Thanks for coming on, Srini. Did I get it?
Srini, yeah,
I
that's
always
right.
want to make sure I'm getting names right because have such interesting people on my show from all over the world, and I love that. It's same thing. Like it took me 3 episodes to get Mahabharata. I was mispronouncing it the whole time, and now I'm getting it. And that's what we're going to talk about today: is the Mahabharata, maybe the Bhagavad Gita, its role in culture, and the particularly the performance. I'll give this back, but this is my script from this is the script we're using for the version of Mahabharata that we're doing here in Austin, February 14th to the 23rd of 2025. So if you are watching this video after that, you've missed our performance, but I still hope you'll get a lot out of this podcast and out of our discussion of the Mahabharata and all its, glory and wonder and influence and productiveness. I like that word in literature, like literature that's productive, where people have built lives and ideas and cultures based on it. So Srini, you have an engineering degree, you have a master's in Sanskrit
studies, yes.
Sanskrit studies, and you helped. So Anne Ciccolello, the artistic director of Austin Shakespeare, who's producing the show and directing the show of Mahabharata Tales that we're doing, she took the Peter Brook version, which is like a 8-hour version or something like that, right? And she shrunk it down. She edited it down herself into like a 2-hour, 15-minute version. You were brought on because of your expertise to help make sure the cultural references were correct, make sure, because obviously you're cutting a lot of stuff. So is the core, the really important scenes, are they contextual? Do they make sense and things like that? Is that correct?
Yes, and my participation actually has not been into heavy editing or anything like that, but into some cultural references, as you say.
Okay.
And mostly towards the philosophical aspect of things.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you listened to my last podcast with Oza, I think.
Yes,
some of
I did, yeah.
We went off on some of the philosophy stuff, so that's interesting. Before we go into deeper things about the Mahabharata, about the Bhagavad Gita and everything, I was hoping you could give a little bit of a overview for someone who does not know the story, right? Or maybe hasn't even heard it before. Most people have probably heard of the Bhagavad Gita, but they probably have not. A lot of people I'm running into, and this is, very smart, educated people, and myself included, months ago, like I barely really heard of this thing. And, I'm really getting excited about learning deeper into it. But if you can give an overview of, especially what might be relevant for someone coming to see this truncated version that might help them get more out of the play, out of, their first steps into the Mahabharata.
Yeah. So it's a very culturally significant epic and a heavy influence over generations.
Yeah.
But in order to understand Mahabharata, we got to understand the meaning of Mahabharata. It's a compound word. Maha means great.
Okay.
Bharata, it's got many meanings.
Yeah.
One meaning is that it's related to Bharata and his dynasty. Bharata was a king.
Okay, king.
King.
Got it.
And, he unified the country. That's one meaning. And then there is another etymological meaning, which is Bha. Bha means the light of knowledge.
Okay.
And those who are immersed in the light of knowledge, the great story about the people that are immersed in the light of knowledge. And so this is, it used to be, people said it was around 24,000 verses, and then later grew to about 100,000 verses.
Yeah.
But there is a critical edition, which actually has about 89,000 verses, I guess. And that's
Also way truncated.
it's around.
Is it Penguin Classics? Is it in that?
And it is.
So I was looking at a version I'm going to get. It's 914 pages, and it says it's a abridged version.
Abridged version.
Yeah, that is of the entirety, but shrunken down to in English. obviously, because I want to read it in English because I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's probably a compiled version, actually.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
But what about so like the story itself, though? So people, I think, are going to come to the Mahabharata for the story, because I think it's a really good story. I think there's interesting elements, there's drama, and when you dive into a story, what I love about literature and poetry and art is you go into this world and John Keats called it the realms of gold, traveling through the realms of gold, which is the realms of the imagination. Yeah. You go into this world and you meet you meet a whole new set of cultural values than what you're probably used to. Yeah. Now we could parse out and discuss philosophically those values, and that's very valuable, and I want to do that. But at the end of the day, the thing that brings us there is the same thing that brings a child in India. I had Kumar Abhinav here who plays Bhishma, and he was talking about in the 90s how everyone, in India, everyone, like every Sunday, I think it was, they went, it was like the whole country shut down for an hour watching this thing. And that, to me, is not, they weren't talking philosophy, right? Yes. It was just what's going on with Arjuna and what's he going to do today and what's Krishna going to do and what's Bhima going to do. And that's what I want to talk about, because I think that's what I hope will bring people to this play and to the broader, story of Mahabharata. So if you could just give us a little bit of an overview of just some basic elements that might help somebody, enjoy the story, get into it, like why it's exciting.
Yeah, sure. The very first verse of Mahabharata, Vyasa declares that in the realm of Dharma, and Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, we say. So these are fourfold values of human life.
Yeah.
Okay, Dharma, the path of righteousness, you could say. And Artha, the means to achieve your desires.
Okay.
Kama means your wants, needs, and desires. And then Moksha, the liberation. Not liberation or the freedom from other people only, but freedom from your own limited thoughts.
Yes.
Right? So this is what it tries to achieve, right?
What the Mahabharata is trying to achieve is getting liberating from your own inner desires.
Yes, inner desire.
That's how it starts, the Mahabharata.
Yes.
Okay, and, so that's like the equivalent of the angers of Achilles in Iliad, maybe.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like you're trying to get away, you're trying to improve from that.
Correct. And for example, Achilles, the wrath of anger, right?
Yeah.
The wrath of anger and his quest for vengeance.
Yeah.
That actually brought him down.
Sure.
The great Greek heroes, suffered from that thing. So what this story is about is, yes, the whole world pursues desires and means to achieve those desires.
Yes.
Right? It's called Kama and Artha. These are like two bulls, it seems. Bulls, where they're not under control.
Okay.
Maximum destruction is caused by Kama and Artha, or the desires and the means to achieve them.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah. So the desire and then the action to get that.
Get that thing. In order to contain them, you need Dharma, a pillar, and then Moksha, another pillar, where these two bulls are tied. When you do that thing, that is going to be under control. Otherwise, they just go haywire.
You got to tie your bulls up.
Yes.
Okay. And then you're saying that's the context of
that's the first verse, which says that in the realm of these fourfold purusharthas, or the values.
Okay.
Whatever purusha artha, meaning purushartha.
And that's basically values.
Values of human life, the most abstract values.
Got it.
Right? And all animals and humans have the desires and the means to achieve those desires, but what they do not have, the knowledge of dharma and the pursuit of happiness or the freedom from all these limitations.
Okay.
Right? So in the realm of these fourfold values, whatever exists in Mahabharata may exist elsewhere. But
what does that mean? Wait,
whatever exists
within the story,
in the story, may exist elsewhere.
Like in real life?
Meaning in other stories, in the world, anywhere else. Okay. But what does not exist in Mahabharata exists nowhere. So that's how he starts.
Oh, so like you're saying it has the tenor of totality in
Yes,
in all of life and philosophy and cosmology and things.
Correct.
So there's something you're touching on something that in Mahabharata,
the first verse.
Yeah, but what you just said, I think, is that it encompasses everything.
Everything.
In a sense. There's nothing outside of it. It is a totality.
Yeah.
About human life, about existence, about the world, about the gods, about the relationship to the gods.
Yes.
Everything. Yeah. And when I do literary canon and things like that, one of the things I try to point out to people is that for thousands of years, up until more contemporary times, really up until like the 1800s, that was the goal of the epic in general.
Yes.
Like the view of Dante or of even Chaucer to some degree, but of Virgil, is that they're encompassing everything about humanity and human existence and experience in the world in a way that we're not familiar with. And I think, I usually think that there's like in the West, there's like 5 great epics that do that. There's the Iliad and the Odyssey, there's Virgil, there's Dante, there's Milton, and then that's it. There's the Paradise Lost, and then after that there's I won't go into too much, but there's people who try to do this, but because of this like burgeoning scientific discovery, it becomes almost a complete appropriation of effort. Like they just cannot encompass all of knowledge at that time, all of information. I think I've read this somewhere that it's probably not even true, but someone said like Samuel Taylor Coleridge was the last man to read everything that was in existence at that time or something like that. It might have been Ben Jonson, but it was like there's some period in the 17th. My point is that that is an important part about epics. It's like because it's an epic, there's something about you're getting to the highest degree all of what that people believed and understood and their whole value system all in one place that you in condensed, or sometimes not as condensed if it's like but somewhat condensed into a approachable text. And that I think is very interesting.
It's very interesting, and it's also the approach of Vyasa here. Not only his confidence can be seen in that verse, but also his humility to acknowledge that it may exist elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right. That's humility too. So,
and that's Arjuna.
That's Vyasa who's writing that verse, right? This is the story of Mahabharata. And so now the story goes saying that, it is not just about one generation. It's about 4 generations.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the structure of the story.
Structure
about
of the 4 generations.
Not just like Achilles.
Yes.
It's about 4 different
generations. The reason there is a reason for why 4 generations. Our life has during our childhood. Now we have a phase of development, and then comes youth, middle age, and then old age.
Sure.
And then these 4 stages across 4 generations will be covered.
Interesting.
So that is what is going to be making it very holistic.
Yeah.
And it's also very cyclical. Some of those mystics are actually repeated.
Are repeated?
Repeated, where there is a conflict between duty and moral responsibility.
Oh, yeah. So we could talk about that at some point too, if we have time, because I think I see that in exploration of heroes from, again, Achilles to even all the way down to modern times, and like the conflicts you find today, even in like Marvel heroes, it tends to be between like a personal moral desire or something they're trying to go after, or their civic duty or their duty to some broader idea. And that is so prevalent, I think we don't even realize that there's other ways of doing and thinking about things. But okay, so what you're trying to, if I'm understanding you, what you're saying is there's the Mahabharata, like any epic, like any great epic in history, has a kind of cultural significance, a cosmological and significance that's important when you're approaching it, to understand that these are not just frivolous tales. There is something deeper, which is the whole point. You're missing out if you don't try to grapple a little bit or think about the deeper meanings of what's going on.
Yes.
So that's one thing that somebody who's coming to the play or coming to Mahabharata for the first time,
Yes.
that they should think about. Is that, when you're seeing it, it's like, things may look a little different to you. Like when I was watching Peter Brook stuff, I was like, this is I've never seen anything like this. And, it's this guy in this bed of arrows, then he stands up on it, but he's dead. Is he not dead? What's going on? Like, it's all this stuff. And it's like, okay, so these guys are hitting each other with this mace, and you can't hit each other in the thigh. And this guy's like,
Yes.
my
rules,
thigh.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, there's all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? There's something deeper going on that is important and part of the interesting exploration of great art.
Yes.
Which I think is there. So what's another thing that somebody who's coming to, again, I want them to get like a sense of the story.
Yeah.
So like they've never heard of Arjuna. So what should they know about the story in a sense that might help them?
Yeah. So the first thing that they have to know about is, people are flawed. People are not always black and white.
Yeah.
So it can be gray, right?
Sure.
So now,
yeah,
when people are gray and they have flaws, and nobody is completely pure, or nobody is completely impure, in those cases, conflict is inevitable. So when there are groups that are actually competing for the same thing or the same resource, in this case, the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
How do you know who's on the right? Now, where do you support? You can be neutral, and if you're neutral, you're actually siding with the evil many times, and it can be seen that
and not take a side is to take a side.
Yeah, it happens there in the Mahabharata.
Sure,
right?
sure. Oh yeah. Even this version is like talk about neutrality and the problem of it.
Yes, yeah. So conflict, neutrality, and how do you find the solution? Is it okay to break the rules in order to uphold a principle, in a moral principle?
Yeah,
right?
like to lie to accomplish a success in war.
Yes.
Which does happen in our show.
Right.
Yeah. Is that acceptable? Do the means justify the ends?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you're trying to win a war, is it okay to be deceitful, to lie, to break your
yes.
vows?
Yes.
Because it wins a war.
Yes. Yeah. And for example, everybody knows killing is immoral. Killing is evil. But soldier kills the enemy in a war. So what happened? Right? So these are certain, some of the moral conflicts that you face every day. But this is set in war, which is actually do or die situation.
Yeah.
So therefore, the decisions tend to be very, very influential and impactful.
Yeah.
So in those cases, how do you resolve a moral conflict? And while you're in that process, can the story be very interesting and gripping?
Yeah.
So
that's what I want to kind of set up for people is how is it still. So again, it's not. Don't want to make it sound to people that it's like it's 2 hours and 15 minutes of people just conversing about philosophy. Right, it's not that at all.
It's not. No.
It really is these tales, and you'll get some mythology, like some deep like gods and where they came from. In India, like Ganesha, we have a whole discussion about where he comes from, and we have a person acting out and portraying Ganesha. Yeah, Ganesha. And that was actually Oza, who's also playing Arjuna, does that as well. Sorry to break the theatrical illusion for you, but he's playing both characters. But so you're going to get a lot of that. You're also going to get this story of Arjuna, Bhima, Yudhishthira, Nakula,
Sahadeva.
And so you get these 5 brothers, the Pandava brothers, and then you have the Kaurava brothers or their cousins of Pandavas, and they go to war. And I think what you're talking about is this conflict, that's part of life. And they're conflicted over this territory that has been lost because of perhaps or probably, you decide, deceit, a moment of deceit by someone on the Kaurava side, but also because of something wrong with Yudhishthira, and who's the eldest and who's making decisions probably that he shouldn't,
Yes.
That's causing a kind of chaos.
Yeah.
And causes a lot of turmoil and things like that. So it's, I think it's like this desire you're talking about, where there's a desire for, winning more and gambling and things like that, and that leads to all these bad things.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there's a kind of deceptiveness, deceit to win these,
To win this thing,
to
yes.
win the things,
Yeah,
and they eventually get that
Yeah.
for some time. But that leads to that leads to a big war that kills thousands of people. And is obviously a big deal. So
Yes. Yeah.
and so that's, I think, a kind of the core of what we're doing, and that's the core of the Mahabharata in a sense.
Yes.
And we're showing the scenes and elements that I think people will get out of.
Yeah. It's full of action. It's full of action.
Yeah, there's
War,
fighting. I
yeah.
have like 4 or 5 fights myself.
Yeah.
I know Arjuna has some cool sword fights. I have my Gada mace.
Wonderful.
Yeah, big old mace. So yeah, and so there's a lot of action. There's love. There's some interest, and like I said, I think the interesting drama and conflicts between like a gray character like Karna.
Yes.
He comes into the action, and who is this person? He's challenging Arjuna because Arjuna is the greatest warrior, but he says he's the greatest warrior. So there's a whole
Yes.
conflict.
There's a lot of
between that.
competition about that. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of competition to who's the best.
Yeah.
Which is part of warrior culture. That's part of all warrior cultures is who's the best.
Best, yes. Yeah.
Right? It's like there was
Personal glory. Yeah.
well, and so that's another thing, because that's a deep theme of all epics in a sense, especially war epics, is this why are you doing this? Well, for glory.
Yeah.
Because I want people to talk about it. And part of what I think Arjuna's internal conflict is, he's gonna kill his relatives for glory and for what?
Yeah,
like,
why? Yeah.
Why is he doing this? And that's part of the question that he's kind of trying to approach.
Yeah.
And then he gets Krishna, who's an incarnation of Vishnu,
Vishnu. Yeah.
who is there to help guide him.
Yes. The divine guidance.
The divine guidance. Yeah. So that's kind of a setup.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Like, I know it's a little long, but I think that's.
Yeah. I mean, for someone that is approaching the story for the very first time, yes, there are good guys. There are bad guys.
Yeah.
There are 5 good guys who are brothers.
But they're gray.
They're somewhat gray, but they're not evil gray. But they have some conflicts, and they're not perfect.
Sure.
And Kauravas.
Bhima's perfect.
Bhima, yeah. He's no conflict at all.
He doesn't have any conflict.
No conflict, yes. And
That's my character.
yeah, Kauravas, the bad guys. And they are led by Duryodhana.
Yeah.
With his 99 other brothers.
Yeah.
And the 4 main villains are Duryodhana, Shakuni,
Yeah.
and then comes Dushasana
Dushasana.
and Karna.
Karna. Yeah.
So these are the 4 main villains
Yeah. So you'll see those 4 villains on stage with
on
us.
stage.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's in our play. And then, you have the 5 Pandavas.
5 Pandavas, the sons of Pandu,
Yeah.
and Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula and Sahadeva, 5 good guys. And they are somewhat, they want the kingdom. Yudhishthira wants the kingdom, and because he's the eldest, and legally he should be given the throne, but he's not being given the throne because Duryodhana does not want it, because he thinks that
Does not want him to have it. You mean.
he does not want
Duryodhana wants the kingdom for himself.
for himself.
Yeah. But Yudhishthira also wants it. And so there's a question of succession.
Question of succession, and so there's the conflict.
Yeah.
They are sent for there is this dispute going on. So Dhritarashtra, who is the blind king, father of Duryodhana, makes a settlement kind of thing where he is given Yudhishthira is given a barren land.
Okay.
A forest, which he actually transforms that into Indraprastha, one of the most beautiful
Oh, really?
kingdoms.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
it's-
not in our story.
That's not in the story, but
We
that's
do go
where
to the
they build.
forest.
That's where they have this palace of illusions.
Oh, okay. So that's not in the story either.
It's not in the
our
story.
story.
Yeah, it's
but
not
it's
in
in the
the
Mahabharata.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the
Obviously, we cut a
Mahabharata.
little bit.
Yes, and that's where Duryodhana feels insulted. So
he feels insulted because Draupadi laughs at him.
Laughs at him.
Yeah,
That's it.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, so supposedly, right?
His ego is hurt.
His ego's hurt because she laughs. Why does she laugh at him again?
She says, he sees the palace. He's just wandering around and then finds there is water that looks like solid tiles and walls that look like waterfalls and those kind of things.
Sure.
And he's all confused and he goes and falls, thinking that it's a
falls
floor.
into this
He
lake.
falls into a pond, and she laughs, saying that there are some various versions.
Yeah.
Where everybody sees that, and she says that, I thought only your father is blind, but are you?
Yeah, so she basically just pokes fun at him.
Yeah.
It's not even like a deep insult.
No.
But it's just, he's, so that's really shows his pettiness.
Pettiness.
And I think that's what the creators are trying to do, I
Yes.
think, is show the pettiness of this guy.
Yeah.
At least according to this. Yeah, and okay, so, but that's, I think, a good overview of what people need to know, really. That's it. Like, I don't think you need to know a lot. Really, I don't think you need to know anything. If you go in blind, metaphorically, you're going to get something out of the play. Like, I think people will still see the blind king. There's explanations. We repeat the names of everybody many times. So people get a sense of who's who, why Arjuna's going here. You know, you'll find that, like we'll say Draupadi is the possession of 5 men, or she's, 5 men are married to her. But you'll see, like, she probably has a favorite maybe with Arjuna, but then Yudhishthira is also, so it's like you'll see all that stuff in the play, and all of it will be pretty clear, I think. Now, the backstory is not going to be clear.
Yeah,
that's what you're missing.
Yes,
and that's why you should explore more of this when you're done with this play. Our play, I think, is a great introduction to it. But and again, if you're seeing this afterwards, that's okay. Just go, just go check out the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to talk about is, and I talked about this a little bit with Ozan. I've been interested in this, which is the relationship between, because Sanskrit is an expertise of yours, the relationship of the Mahabharata to Greek and Roman and other epics. Because again, I've been studying those my whole life, and there's just such similarities. And it's really funny to, like, so far, and I've had a couple of people on the show who grew up with them, like, because I didn't grow up with myth. Like, we don't really grow up with myth in America in the same way. Like, I grew up with Spider-Man and Wolverine and Saturday morning cartoons. I wasn't raised Christian, really. So Christians, I think, will go to Sunday school and they'll learn Christian stories. But we don't really have that in, a more secular Western thing about these mythical stories. So it's been very interesting, like, hearing certain pushback on certain ideas I have, but I really am seeing such a core similarity between it, where it's like there's a conflict over, there's a big civil or war of some sort over a territory, right? You have a character, and there's even a dispute over the loss of personal glory or a personal thing, like Achilles loses Briseis, a slave girl, and that's what sets off the action of the Iliad. Arjuna and his brothers, but Arjuna, if we take just Arjuna, loses his wife. And that kind of sets off the kind of, chain reaction that leads to the war, in a sense, and the getting of the war. You see what I'm saying, though? And so Draupadi is obviously very different than Helen, but I see there's definite similarities where it's like there's some central story involved that is causing the conflict. And it is, in this case, the loss, in Achilles' case, it's the loss of Briseis by the arbitrary dictates of Agamemnon. In the sense of Mahabharata, it's the Yudhishthira gambling loses Draupadi to the, now there's certain interventions that bring her back and they all go to the forest. But I think that whole situation is what leads to the civil war, right?
Yeah.
So I just, like, a whole bunch of similarities like that, and then I think even the whole sense of Arjuna having his conflict about what he should do is similar to what Achilles and other, more similar to Aeneas.
So I think, Achilles never became a slave, though. Whereas here,
Yeah. No, I understand that. But I'm just saying there's definitely a lot of differences.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there's no differences. I'm saying the reason I'm asking this, and you specifically in Sanskrit, is I'm wondering where the similarities came from. Right? So what happened? Is it, so I know there's something, and I don't know much about this. Maybe you can help. I know there's something with the Indo-European origins in language to Sanskrit that's actually similar
to
to
Greek
German and others.
to Greek and Latin.
Greek and Latin, and but even I think German, and like there's a lot of like proto. What's the word?
Proto-Indo-European.
Thank you. Proto, that they're coming from the same kind of place, and that must be where some similarities come from. Is that there's some origin that's similar?
It's not just the language.
Yeah.
It's the culture too.
Sure.
They're all very sisterly cultures.
Which you don't think of at first.
Yeah, and especially people that have the background of Ramayana or Mahabharata, they can grasp the Greek epics and the Greek mythology probably in an easier way.
Yeah.
Here is the reason, right? I mean, you have Zeus, the son of Cronus, right?
Yes.
Or Uranus for the Romans.
Yeah, it depends where you're coming from.
So the similar, in fact, the parallel or the analogous god of the Indians is Indra, the father of Arjuna.
Yeah, which we talk about in our
king,
show.
the king of gods.
King of gods, yeah.
Right, and we do have Hercules. Hercules is probably similar to Bhima.
Yes, that's what I've getting
in terms of physical strength.
And he does adventures on his own too,
yeah.
Just like Hercules did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Achilles is somewhat similar to Karna.
Huh.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, maybe.
Yeah, but his vengeance when Patroclus, his cousin, dies.
Yeah.
And then he goes in and fights Hector. Right, and then he says, "There's no pact between lions." Right?
Yeah.
When he says, and in fact, you see the similarities there. The reason I came to that point is because the rules that should be followed in a war, right? They wouldn't fight during night times. They wouldn't fight. From the you can't hurt from the back. You got to face. You had to fight face to face.
Yeah, it's warrior culture.
Yeah, warrior culture. In fact, the Kauravas raised those kind of points where, hey, you got to follow the rules of the war.
Yeah.
You see, the Kauravas are always saying that you got to be following this societal rule, these rules of the war, and you're breaking it.
Yeah.
That's
like a deceptive thing that people who are deceivers by nature will do. They'll try to hold you to rules, but then they'll be secretly breaking them or doing something deceptive.
Yeah, it's like societal rules to the letter, but not in spirit.
Not in spirit. Yeah,
not in spirit, and they keep doing that.
And they'll use that against you.
Yeah, they use it against you.
But that's like a human thing that you see in life. It's a really important lesson. Yes. I think in life is you'll see people who are trying to hold you to certain societal or whatever rules. But they're really just doing it to manipulate you and get something out of you, I think, or to win something over you or put something over you.
Yeah, and he was Achilles was actually his wrath was so much that he actually drags the dead body of Hector for about 12 miles or so, right?
Yeah, back to camp. That circles around.
Yes, I think that kind of thing happens for Abhimanyu, where he's killed. In a very brutal way, though he was only 16 years old, and they attack from the back, deceiving him, and he's captured, and that actually makes Arjuna take the oath that he would kill Jayadratha.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, because that's his son.
Yeah, that's
Arjuna's son.
Yes.
So Arjuna. And that's what I mean about the similarities. Is that there's, but again, I think that makes Arjuna more Achilles than Karna. But there's probably similarities between many of the heroes.
Karna has, yes.
I think of Bhishma as almost a Hector, actually.
Yes, you could say that.
Like in an interesting way, because he's really dealing with the real life consequences of this, I mean, obviously one big difference is that he is unconquerable, and Hector is very human.
So, coming back to the point that why these are all similar cultures,
Yes.
because they are very open to nature and the gratitude for natural forces, and seeing, having the assigned deities for all these, for nature and the natural forces.
Yeah.
For example, the Indians have in the Mahabharata, you would see the god of wind, or the god of breath, Vayu, and
That's Bhima's
Bhima's father, and Yudhishthira is the son of Yama or Dharma. It's got multiple names, and he's also the king of the netherworld, like Hades, right? And
that makes sense.
Yeah.
For Yudhishthira.
Yudhishthira, yeah. And but I don't know much about Hades, because I don't see Hades doing he doesn't pass on judgments like Yama does, the father of Yudhishthira.
Yeah. He's the king of the underworld.
King of the underworld.
Yeah.
So, and then we have Ashwini Kumaras, who are the fathers of Nakula and Sahadeva. They are, they're not for swordsmanship as well as wisdom.
Wisdom. Yeah.
That's where they excel, right? And also they are gods of medicine and all that, it is said. We have similar deities in the Greek culture. For example, the goddess of war was Athena.
Yes.
Right, and goddess of knowledge too, goddess of wisdom, and so we have.
I wouldn't call her the goddess of war, but Ares is
knowledge.
The goddess of war. Yeah,
yeah.
She's more like wisdom.
Wisdom.
Yeah.
But
anyway, so there's Ares. So yeah, what's interesting though is you're absolutely correct. There's all these similarities. There's all these different wars but I think that's pretty prevalent in most cultures, whether they're Indo-European in nature or not, or in origin or not. But there's still something about the specific details of the story.
Oh yeah.
Like that must have happened where there was some peoples and the echoes of history or something that, were similar, and then they spread out and throughout Europe and India, and eventually came up with their own versions of these things. That's my hypothesis or my view. I don't know, but because there's just the similarities in structure and what they're going about is interesting, and then there's differences that are also interesting.
Yes, yes. The answer to that thing is there have been a lot of research going on since the days of William Jones.
Yeah.
Who was...
Tell us about William Jones.
He was not only an Indologist, but he was one of the viceroys of the British Empire at the time. Yeah. He was the one who actually discovered the similarity between Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin, and all of that.
He was a philologist.
Yeah, and then went on to say, Sanskrit is this language is... more copious.
Could you imagine
Greek.
that as a discovery? Like it's like this culture that looks so different than yours, and then you're like, but we have like the same origins.
Yes, same
there's
origins.
Something similar. And that's what I'm finding really interesting about Mahabharata again is, and then just talking to all these people that are like on the cast or from India or have that culture, just they all love the Greek too. They all are very interested, and again because there's similarities. And to me, what's so exciting and why I want to explore more of Indian culture now is that in studying Latin and Greek and all of it, other than the English, you're kind of studying a dead mythology.
Yeah.
But in studying the Mahabharata, it's a living
culture.
Yeah, so it's like you really get a sense.
Yeah, in fact, you see all those 7 great civilizations of the earth, right? You had Greeks, and the Greeks, those epics are in the library today. They're not living. And Romans, Virgil's it's not a living civilization. It's there in the library.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right. The Egyptians gone. The South American culture, so that's Incans gone. Incans and Mayans and all that. Yeah. And Mesopotamian, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Yeah. Where is it today?
Yeah. Right. And where are the people who believe in it and follow it?
Yes. And so none of them actually, except in India, it's an epic living culture where people name their kids after the characters of Mahabharata.
Well, I know. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, in a good way. I mean, crazy. It's just like it's just like I found it so, I don't know, it really teaches you a lot about what these epics and what these mythologies are really about.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the only analogy I've always had with them is like Christianity. Which is an analogy, because that does have its own mythology. It does have its own dogma. It has its own value system and things like that. And that's the same, it's the same kind of thing on that basis. But there's an alienness to that, in my view, actually, even though it's so prevalent today. There's an alienness in just how different the basic story, desires, values, goals, everything of Christianity versus the Greeks. I just find them to be so different. Whereas I find the Indian to be much more, I mean, just as an example that I'm sure you know, just the idea of eroticism and like the connection from eroticism to being a concrete exploration and expression of a love for God.
Yeah.
And I think there's a more desire with Indian religion and there's some religions like this, of course, not just Indian, but that are more about the concrete than the abstract, where it's more about the thing here, the physical manifestation, that's important over the abstract or in conjunction with the abstract. Whereas I think Christianity is way more about the abstract at the expense of the concrete.
Yeah.
It's much more about this, somehow vague kind of idea in the sky that kind of a man with a beard or whatever is God, or they somehow manifested in God the Son, the Holy Spirit, and what is it? The Son, the Spirit, and what's the last one?
Yeah.
The Holy Ghost, the
Son,
the
and
Father.
the Father. Yeah.
Which is like,
Trinity.
And it's like the Trinity, and then they argue and fight and kill over whether that's real or not. But it's just, that's so abstract in details versus in India where it's, about the concrete, which allows you to have things like a better expression of love and eroticism and things like that.
Oh,
which,
yeah.
to me is much healthier than, I'm not a fan of Christian stuff, to be honest, but anyway, so to me, I'm learning so much about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the idea of dharma helps there because, so there is a difference between rules and principles, right? And there is a difference between fact and value.
Yes.
Right. This whole of Indian philosophy or Mahabharata is about pursuit of values, right? And the idea that principle is more important than the rules of society. You would see that in Mahabharata,
Principle is more important than the.
Because to uphold a principle,
sure,
you're breaking rules many times.
Yes.
And in fact,
the principle being the more abstract guidance,
abstract
the rule
guidance.
being a more concrete. Thou shalt not.
Yes, thou shalt not.
Versus, something along the lines of pursue justice, which might include killing.
Yes.
So it's like you can't say thou shalt not kill. That may be a commandment, but if you're pursuing justice, you might have to kill somebody in that sense.
Yes,
right?
and also
so that's the principle versus the rule.
Yeah. I mean, for example, the rules are elevated in Abrahamic traditions. The rules are elevated to the level of absolute.
Absolute.
Absolute. Yeah. Thou shalt not worship any other god before me.
Yes.
Or no graven image, no symbols.
Yeah.
But what you would see, whether you might be saying that, but you would see symbols, you would see.
Oh, true. So they're breaking it, and then
So
there's a whole joke about like Catholics are they're ingrained guilt.
Oh yeah.
They're always guilty because you have to break rules to live.
Yeah.
Like you have to break all the rules to live and enjoy life.
And also, I mean, you should not have a visual image. What about the image of sound?
Yeah.
Other Abrahamic tradition, even sound is a symbol. The word is a symbol.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you have five senses, you are operating with the world through symbols.
Yes. Yeah, and you need that.
There's
no way to do without it.
You need.
But you'll see like manifestations in culture, like Muslim cultures won't allow you to draw Muhammad or other depictions of Allah because they believe it to be this kind of evil manifestation of it, so they will kill you for it sometimes.
Exactly.
And it took a lot of progressive thinking in the West to start projecting God, Jesus. Like there's a lot of great Christian paintings from like 11th, 12th, 13th century where they start developing, because they finally get into it's acceptable and more acceptable to actually depict Christ, which I think allows for more iconography, but it allows for the development of art in a sense to do that until you get to like the Pieta. Right, and like what is that, the 1500s or something? I don't know if you've ever seen that, but you know what I'm talking about? The Michelangelo's Pieta.
Oh yeah, Michelangelo's. Okay,
the Pieta's beautiful. Like it's just one of those things. Anyway. Yeah, but I mean, they would not have been able to do that like 5 years ago.
In fact, I guess one of Delphi, though, when she is being painted as prophesizing about Jesus, right? Something on the Michelangelo,
oh, that one I don't know.
Yeah, they have. I mean, even the paintings had to be changed in order to build this narrative.
To build the narrative that fits with what they have.
And of course, I've heard about even the Romans, for that matter, the Roman culture, which was very Greek, but with different names. Athena was Diana. Right, and
they just took everything. They didn't have much of a culture in that way. Just took it from the Greeks. And just changed it to some. I think they had some like precursor gods. I mean, I think what they took from the Greeks were the stories. So they had certain names of the same type of, like you said, Diana and Athena or something, but then they didn't really have a story.
Yeah, and then Enid, the king of the Romans, happens to be one of the ones who actually, one of the kings who was with Odysseus, right? So that's the word.
No, he was a Trojan.
Trojan,
was a Trojan. Yeah, so he was a Trojan after the Trojan War. He's fleeing Troy to found Rome. So yeah, he's defeated by the Greeks, and but it's the story of the Aeneid is his traversing through Africa, and he goes to Carthage. It's a famous story of him and Dido. And then again, just like Arjuna and these other characters, it's conflict internally of his personal desires and goals and values versus his civic duty to found Rome. And then but then he goes out and goes. But yeah, he's Trojan. The reason Virgil does this, I think, because he's actually prescripted to do this in a sense.
Yes, by Augustus.
Augustus tells him to do this and wants him to write the national epic, which is an interesting cultural progression thing we could talk about at some, it's interesting. I have talked about it on the show before, but the point is that he's pulling from this Greek story that is the inspiration for all of them. They all love Homer. He's the god of everything, even though he's a human. And then they want to put it in that story. They structure it similarly, but they do it in a very Roman, more essentialized way, basically. And then they make it all about pietas, which is Roman for duty of father. And it's like a certain kind of duty. That's a structure that's a core motivating factor for him, is pietas. But yeah, anyway, so he's, but again, another example of just exploring the other cultures.
Yes. And the similarities, when I was reading these kind of stories, and it was really surprising and astounding for me too, because these are separated by thousands of miles, but the kind of stories that they are telling, and when I studied the language similarities, and in fact there are still many European languages, for that matter, Lithuanian language is very close to Sanskrit.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, go ahead.
And also English, for that matter, right? We say for mother, mata in Sanskrit, mater in Latin, mater, and then mother.
Yeah.
Pita, peter, father.
Yeah. And that's where pietas comes from.
Pietas. Okay. I see.
Yeah, it comes from the same
pietas,
idea.
pita.
Yeah, so it's like loyalty to your father or duty to your father type thing.
And Zeus, Peter, in Sanskrit it's Dios Pita. Dio Pita. Dio. Yeah, Dio means paradise. Father of the paradise.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Pita means and
this is what,
if you split Jupiter, it's Dio Pita, Jupiter.
Diopata.
Diopita is
Oh,
Jupiter. Jupiter.
Yeah.
Zeus becomes Jew.
Yeah. Man, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
could.
the same meaning,
Yeah, there's
right?
so many different. Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, there's obviously some similarities in these.
And in Sanskrit, we have swasa for sister. Swasa,
Yeah.
sister.
Yeah.
Bhrata for brother. So there is a lot of similarities,
And yet when you visit or you it seems like it's very different.
Yes.
Like that's what's interesting to me is just that there's such core similarities, but you would approach it in a very different way.
Very differently.
And my assumption is part of that is because of how Christianity influenced the West, which is one reason why there would be so differences. So like if Christianity never existed in the West, or if there was Greece as it was, like if a Greek from the 3rd century BC were to travel to India.
Yeah. They did that.
Well, yeah. But I mean like way later, like after Christianity. But so like if you were to take
even before Christianity, Greeks came to India. Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of traveling. Alexander conquered some of India, right?
A part of that.
Part
thing
of it,
in
yeah.
there, And
Like
he couldn't come inside though.
He couldn't get all the way in.
Yeah.
It was a little too far for him, but he still conquered some of it. So there's definitely like interplay in that sense. And I'm just saying, like, if you were to pluck out of history, like an ancient Greek, I think he would find himself more at home in India today than he would in like America today in some sense. Just because now that he would, there's a lot of America and the West that is actually Greek more than, but I think the Christian influences have really changed the structure and nature of the West.
The Western
in a way
world,
that makes it more alien to
more
India.
alien, where the Westerners could not relate to their own ancestors and their stories.
Yeah, because it's like, especially if you're couched in Christian belief system, and I hear this all the time today.
And I found that in, I guess, Dante's Alighieri, where the Greek heroes and the Roman heroes, they're all in hell.
Well, they're all in hell, yeah. And part of that is because, obviously, it's very Christian. This is like 1300s. But he admired them so much.
Inferno, right?
Yeah, but he still admired them. Well, Virgil's the guide.
Yes.
So his guide through hell and purgatory is Virgil. And then when he makes it to paradise or paradiso, it's Beatrice. So it's his love. And I mean, that's a whole other story, but because it's again an example of the way that Christianity has changed the nature of things like the concept of love. Where, again, in Dante, and you see this in Petrarch, you see it a little bit, Shakespeare starts improving on it. I think he improves this story, but there's a very disconnected, not sexual, not erotic. It's about these high ideals, but not the concretes, like not the specifics. So there's a lot of Western traditions of love, like Dante, where it's like this really abstract, motivating force that you're for, and you want to achieve, but you're not ever really going to achieve it. And that's, to me, that's like the same kind of relationship they have with God in a sense, where it's like there's not, he's just this kind of abstraction that's really vague. There's not a lot of definition to who he is or what he's about. Jesus has a little more definition, of course, but so there's that I think is really part of it. Versus in India, it seems like, again, or in the Indian, like in Hinduism and things like that, it seems like there's just so much more of the appreciation of the specific, the concrete, the definite. Yeah. And that's a big difference. And that's how the Greeks were. And the Romans were the same way in a lot of ways, but they started, I think paving the way for the Christians who are going to pull out that and just kind of take it away and make it all about this broad abstract idea of one God. Because that one God is just by nature way less definite. Because if you have Zeus who's thunder, he's got specific characteristics. He's talked about in the Homer, he's jealous a lot of times, he comes down in golden showers or whatever. There's Hera who's really jealous, and they all have very specific characteristics. And as you go through the epics, you'll notice that they, even in the Aeneid, they start to coalesce where their characteristics become less defined. And then they just disappear in Christianity. And it's just like just one voice from up high, and that's it.
Yeah.
And, again, India, I think, has more of that Greek, right? And it has more of the definite things to it, which to me is really interesting.
Yes. And I think because the stories, whatever the abstract principle is, they have to be shown in the form of stories and characters. It has to be a living example.
Yeah, exactly. For India. Yeah.
For India.
So, and the Greeks too. And the Greeks were all, that's why like poetry and playwriting were so big.
Yes, it's very big. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to literature, guess what? There are about 35 million manuscripts. In Sanskrit,
in Sanskrit.
In Sanskrit and Indic languages. But if you put all of Greek and Latin manuscripts together, it's around 300,000.
Well, that we have left. I don't know what we had like under the...
Right. And many of them happen to be religious in nature.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And they're, especially the Greek mythologies and epics, they are in library today, unexplored.
Yeah.
That is sad.
That's what I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to get more people to read the great 5 epics of the West, and maybe I might even add the 6th of Mahabharata as part of it. Probably an abridged. I don't think I want to do the 10-volume set. To be honest.
But it's really, really big. And,
it's 10 volumes is one that I saw, like 10 big books.
Yes.
I mean, I like big books. I'm fine with big books, but that's like on another level.
Yeah. And they're all relatable, and it's easier to switch from the Greek and the Latin epics to Mahabharata and Mahabharata to the back and forth. And you could relate. In fact, like what you're saying is you can find the similarities in terms of culture, in terms of value system and all of that. And like you said...
if you read the Greeks.
If you read the Greeks, yes. Yes, I mean, it's easier for me, coming from the background of Ramayana, it's another epic, and then Mahabharata, it's easier for me to appreciate all of the Greek stories. And I've been watching for the same reason. Read about them for that thing. And when Priam comes and then tells, holds the hand of Achilles, saying that I'm kissing the hand of the very person who killed my son, begging him to return his body. That touches my heart. And that is what I find in Ramayana and Mahabharata. It's those
touching moments that are personal.
Very personal.
They're powerful, they're dramatic, and they have deeper meaning.
Deeper meanings, yes.
Yeah, and there's definitely, so I have a line in the play. And again, I think a lot of this is going to be kind of lost, but you'll see it a little bit just because you're not getting the whole play. But I have a line, I always wonder why he had the same feet as you. After a discovery that Arjuna and Kunti is Arjuna's mother, and Bhima's.
Oh, yeah.
And
Karna's mother.
It's not...
Kunti is Karna's mother.
As well as
Pandavas.
Yeah, as well as the Pandavas. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like there's this moment of discovery and identity and things like that that's really powerful about the... what I'm saying is just trying to relate it to what you just said about Achilles and Priam, because part of what's happening with Achilles and Priam there, which is different but similar, like they're doing, accomplishing similar functions, is like what it's a kind of new form of empathy, right? So Priam is reminding Achilles that he has a father, right? And that your father is going to lose a son, and you should sympathize and pity me and let me have my son, because you need to think about your father, which is a whole new way of thinking about enemies.
Correct.
Right? It's like you don't think of enemies like that. But the Greeks really made, and Homer really made alive this idea of sympathy, like the other is not evil, which I think is actually, misinterpreted in our literary discussions today. People think that the Greeks invented the idea of the other or something like that, but they actually invented more the idea of like empathy with enemies.
Yes.
The idea of the other being, evil and bad is part of nature. Yes. The discovery that they're also human or can be like you, that's a discovery. And I think with Arjuna and Karna and Kunti, seeing that this guy that he hates, who's his competitor, but is really there's something deeper going on, and that they have a similarity, that they're two sides of the same coin almost, and they're coming from the same people. One just happened to be born into this other world. I think that's part of that discovery of what Arjuna has. I don't know what you think about that. At least in our story. So I haven't read the whole Mahabharata, so I don't know how much that's in there.
And I mean, here in Mahabharata, the most interesting thing that you would find is Bhishma, who happens to be a devotee of Krishna, fighting on the enemy side.
Yeah.
Fighting him. And in spite of fighting Krishna, he gets liberation.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. No, and it's part of it where I think, again, the focus on conflict is really important, because it's two families. It's one family essentially, and it's and like the Kauravas and the Pandavas are related, and they're fighting. But it's also, like you're saying, choosing sides. So you have like Drona, who comes and teaches the Pandavas and the Kauravas, who are both raised by Bhishma. So Bhishma's raising them together.
Great-granduncle. Yeah,
as kids, they're kind of like fighting, and I know in the Mahabharata there's all these stories about like trying to drown Bhima or something like that. Like there's all these stories, but essentially they're all together, working together, living and fighting and playing together. And then Drona comes in when they're kind of young adults, and he's like this master trainer, and he trains them, and then the conflict occurs. And now different people are choosing different sides. And now you have Bhishma on the sides of the Kauravas, which you wouldn't expect, I think, right? You have Drona on the side of the Kauravas. And then you have interesting things where Yudhishthira, the Pandava brother, goes and asks, can I fight you? And so there's like these respect things happening, which you don't get that as much in, well, that's not true. You get a little bit of that in the Iliad, actually. There's a really interesting moment between Glaucus and some other Trojan. I'm forgetting who it is. But they come up together, and you see this a lot in, I think, Middle Eastern cultures, where they start relating their lineage because they're trying to find, like, is there a moment of connection? And you see that to this day in the Middle East. Like, a lot of people in the Middle East, they will stand there, and when they meet each other, they'll talk about their parents, their grandparents, their parents, and say, oh yeah, 14 generations back, we were the same, right? And that's not something we do in the West, so it's very strange to us. But they did that in the Iliad, and there's this moment with Glaucus and some other where it's like, oh, my father or grandfather gave Xenia to your, guest. He was a guest or a host of, your grandfather. So we have a connection. So I'm not going to fight you, or out of respect, or something like that. And so you see that in both epics, the Mahabharata, the Iliad,
and it's a human conflict where many times loyalty is preferred over honesty, and you see that in Mahabharata, where loyalty is of paramount importance for Karna, for Bhishma, and even Drona, for that matter.
Loyalty is big to all of us.
Big, yeah.
I mean, we all want loyalty in our lives,
and
or we should.
Yeah, and they elevate loyalty. To the fact of, this is the supreme Dharma.
The supreme Dharma is loyalty. Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah, it was like
that's like one of the core.
They were
values in the Mahabharata, you think?
Yeah, on the wrong side, and they were wrong. So Krishna says that. So when you do that, when you made loyalty over honesty as the primal dharma, right?
Oh, that's wrong. You're saying
that is
honesty
wrong.
Is the
honesty is of
paramount.
Yeah, it's of greater importance.
But they elevated loyalty.
Loyalty. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So you see that, and their reason for neutrality when Draupadi is being
who's they?
The
Bhishma.
Drona and Bhishma and all of them.
And Dhritarashtra.
And Draupadi is being dragged.
Yeah, by Dushasana. I will drink your blood is one of my lines.
And
I swear.
Bhishma doesn't speak.
Yeah, he doesn't. Well, they ask him in our play.
Yeah.
They ask him, like, what should we do? Like, or somebody says, because there's a conflict there when Draupadi says, and one thing I like about Draupadi, I have to say, is that she speaks up for herself.
Yes.
She's not like a passive woman. She's
never.
She's standing up, and she's trying to fight for herself in a patriarchal society. Yes. But anyway, so she's like, well, how could Yudhishthira have gambled me if he gambled himself first?
Yes.
Like, doesn't, and then, I think Madri and Bhishma kind of say, no, so unfortunately, you're not, it doesn't matter.
Madri is dead, right, by the time. It's Bhishma and Yudhishthira.
Wait. Madri's dead?
Madri is the second wife of Pandu. She's dead in the
Who
beginning.
am I
Yeah.
thinking? Gandhari.
Gandhari.
Sorry.
Gandhari. Yes.
See, I'm still trying to get these straight. Yeah, so Gandhari is the one who puts a blindfold on her head or over her eyes because her husband, the king Dhritarashtra, is blind, born blind.
And then they argue that, wife's rights are actually tied to husband's rights.
Yeah, so she has no rights. Yeah.
See, there was that conflict.
But that's typical of an ancient epic. But the thing that's interesting is her standing up for herself.
Yes, she does. Yes. Yeah. And in fact, she was the one who wants the war. And almost everybody gave up.
Well, that's what I say. Yeah. Like I really said this, and a couple people really pushed back, who loved the epic. They say it was very complicated, or they're conflicted or whatever. I think that she really is a kind of Helen figure in the sense of centralized person to the origin of the war. She's not the fundamental cause.
She's not the fundamental.
The causes are the two people's fighting over this.
There is conflict,
but she is the origin. Like, without her, there's no conflict.
Yes.
Right? Like, there's no war between them if they don't take Draupadi.
Yeah.
Or if Draupadi isn't married to the five brothers at all, and they're not.
Yes. And so in fact, she is married to five brothers because Kunti did not want the conflict among brothers too.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's, that's one thing about epics and poetry is you'll see this kind of repetition.
Yes.
To kind of show you the idea in different formats. Different ideas. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And Draupadi is probably the most interesting character. And
I really think of her as like a strong female character for that.
Oh yeah,
especially
very
for that time,
strong, very strong.
But in any time.
Yeah. I think you tried to draw parallels to Medea, right? That was interesting because Medea is all about vengeance to the point that she has to murder her own children.
Yeah.
Draupadi actually loses her children, all five of them.
Yes, she doesn't murder.
In the war. Yeah, she doesn't murder, but she loses them.
Yeah.
And the only person that actually sided with Draupadi throughout the story was Krishna. Nobody else, not even her.
I thought Bhima.
Bhima was, Bhima
fought for, I remember I fight for her.
Yeah.
And look what I have the line, watch what I do now for you, and I eat this guy's guts.
Yes. And
who was her enemy who dragged her, that's my retribution.
Yes.
So it's I feel like in that moment, I'm the Furies.
Yes.
In Greek mythology.
Yeah.
I'm like one of the Furies. It's her fury.
He doesn't have inner conflict like
Bhima.
others.
Yeah.
Bhima does not have.
Yeah, Bhima does. I don't see any inner conflict. Again, I think that's why one of the reasons why Anne chose me for Bhima. Besides my size, I think my acting abilities are limited. So with Bhima, I could just be, basically he's ready to fight at any moment. He's ready to jump into action.
Yeah.
There's a moment when it's I basically jump into a holy fire almost to fight it off, right? Yeah. And you could watch the show to see what I mean by that. But there's that's how Bhima I think is, right? He just jumps right into it.
Right into it. It is always very action oriented, and many times people confuse that for impulsivity, but he had a very clear understanding of right and wrong, and who is evil, who is not.
Yeah, so why question?
The only person who would say that I would burn your hands to Yudhishthira when he was wagering kingdom, brothers, and also Draupadi, right? So at that point, he says that actually.
Does he really?
Yeah.
I will burn your hands?
Yeah, I'll burn your hands.
Because you don't, one thing is the older brother is the one in charge.
Yeah.
And there's a deep respect for that.
Very deep respect there in the story.
Yeah.
Very
you have to always keep that in mind.
He was the next king, yes.
Yeah, when you're watching the play or reading it, you have to really keep in mind that it's because there's moments where it's why would they not stop him? But it's he's in charge.
He's in charge, and
he's like father in a sense.
Yeah, he already did Rajasuya, a ritual to be declared as a king, and he had Indraprastha, Yudhishthira, and he was the declared king of Indraprastha.
Oh, okay.
So there's a deep respect for him. And
Yeah.
there is definitely the social ranking.
Well, and he is like in the show. I don't know if this comes across a little bit. There's some moments where this happens, but Yudhishthira is the wise one in a
He's
sense.
very
right?
wise.
He's very wise.
Yes.
You do get a scene around a pool with a god Dharma. I think, is it Dharma or who's talking when they're at the pool drinking the water? They have to be forced.
Oh, Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is the one answering.
But who's the god or who's saying it?
Oh, Yaksha.
Yaksha.
Yaksha,
Sorry,
yeah.
Okay. So, because we don't say that in the play, it's not like Yaksha speaks. It's
Yeah,
just
exactly.
we have this voice that tells us what to do and we do it, right?
Yeah.
But Yudhishthira is the only one who has the wisdom to like listen to the voice and answer the voice. And there, again, this is like there's so many similarities. It's like that's Oedipus, solving the riddle of the Sphinx or something.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like he's getting these challenges, and that's he's wise enough to kind of solve some of the challenges to overcome the kingdom and so there's similarities in so many different places.
Yes,
Now the difference is one big difference is there aren't, as far as I know, in Greek mythology at that point they've really lost the animal as god type thing, and you don't get like a elephant Ganesha type character where now he has a backstory, but you don't get a character in Greek mythology where there's like an elephant's head or something like that. That's one difference between the gods. But I think the relationship between the gods is and mortal men is similar in Greek mythology and in Mahabharata and others.
They're very anthropomorphic.
And both are very anthropomorphic. Now, I don't have enough of a sense of Mahabharata from the play to get us, because I have a real sense of the Greek and Roman gods in this. And what I mean by that is just the interactions they have with each other. And
I would see that in Egyptian gods, though. I think
the Egyptian gods are I think some of the most. I think maybe in South American, there's a lot of animal gods, and that's very different. But I think the Greeks were one of the few, if not the only, that had like none of that.
Oh.
Like they had no, nothing where it's like an animal head or nothing like that. Like it was all human, which I think is an interesting difference between them and some. But I forgot what I was going to say. But it's the.
What about Medusa? Wasn't she?
She had like when she wasn't a god. She was more like a witch.
Witch. Oh.
But I think she had like snake. She was a gorgon, so she had like these snake hair
yeah.
that turned you stone.
Hairs were like that of the snake.
So she had like snake hair.
Snake hair.
Yeah. So, but she wasn't like a god that they would worship.
Yes.
Right. There may be some exception that I don't know about. That's not a prominent one, but not that I know. Like they're all very human
faces.
Yeah. And they're from very early on, 800, in Homer's doing it, it's like, they're not just human in looks. They behave so human.
Behave
like the interactions between the gods in the Iliad and the Odyssey is so much squabbling, so much fighting. Yeah. They're also not omniscient or omnipotent. And I don't know if that's quite true, because it seems like when Krishna reveals himself as Vishnu, there's this view of he's like everything.
Yes.
He's an embodiment of the
universal form.
This universal form. You don't get that in the Greeks. Like my favorite example, I think it's in the Odyssey, or it might be the Iliad. But
the idea that the gods actually behave like humans is very very much central to epics. It's the approach in the epics is like that.
Absolutely.
Because it's human centric. It's not God centric.
Right? Yes, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is how the relationship is in each epic is different, and that's what's interesting. So you're right that in all epics, God is central to it. This is one reason why epics start to die out after basically the 1600s, when you have modern science and you have the encroachment, in a sense. That's how religious people would think about it, is like encroachment on their metaphysical world of science and like ordering the universe now, where it's not ordered by gods, it's ordered by laws and physical laws that you can measure.
See, that kind of conflict doesn't happen here at all in the Indic traditions. The reason being that even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about 3 levels or stages of epistemology. One is the physical world, physical and inferencing based on physical perception, which is called adhibhuta, meaning of the adhibhuta, towards manifested world.
That's what it means.
Yeah,
The manifested word.
Yeah, manifested
So
word.
like word come to life almost.
Yeah.
Right?
Manifested world. When you word is the adhibhuta.
Wait, I'm sorry. W-O-R-D or W-O-R?
W-O-R-L-D.
World. Okay, so
Word.
manifested world.
Manifested world.
Okay.
And so that's the epistemology for that. And then he talks about adhidaiva, meaning deity based, where it's the epistemology of belief, the realm of beliefs.
Yeah.
Right? And then he says above these two is adhyatma, the towards the self with a capital S.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that is what I'm going to be talking to you about.
That's the crux of the Bhagavad Gita,
Gita,
which
yes.
is the center of the Mahabharata.
Center of the Mahabharata.
And
And so the scientific discoveries or whatever, those pursuits are in the realm of adhibhuta, or in the epistemology of the manifested world, the expressed world. So
Yeah, I had this debate with Oza after the podcast, actually.
Oh, I see. Okay,
I'm not 100% convinced yet, because there's, to me, like, I put it into a framework of mysticism versus, reason fact-based in a sense. And like, so there's still, to me, it sounds like there's even if it's about the world, it sounds like there still seems to be a mystical approach to it. And the scientific revolution is really an approach of the physical laws of nature. Like it's a discovery and understanding and a computation of the physical laws of nature. And that is, I think, very separate from the a kind of mystical approach to the laws of nature. So the laws, do we have gravity because God said so, or do we have gravity because there's certain magnetic and forces of bodies to coming of heavenly bodies or astrological bodies coming together in such a way that brings smaller objects down to bigger objects or something. And there's actual measurements you can do, and you can study that, and that is a different process than. What was the middle word you said? That
adhidaiva, or the deity. Daiva, or what you towards the divine.
Towards the divine.
Divine, yeah.
But that's what I mean. So it's like
Right.
it's got that divine taste to it.
Yeah, they are just nothing. Think of them as the beliefs, the assigned deities, and the sense of gratitude will result in the action of worship.
Sure.
So that is in that level of epistemology.
Yeah.
So when
But you're comparing that to the scientific revolution.
no, I'm not.
I'm sorry.
I'm only. But the scientific revolution happens to be in the manifested world, the world that is sensible.
Yeah. Okay. So it's in the sensible world, but I'm just saying that.
Beliefs are so. I mean, it's
But
not
that-
shared reality.
So
Beliefs
tell me
are-
how you think they're separate
from
from the scientific revolution.
From the science, science is about the pursuit of what I find. The physical objects are operating in such and such a way,
Yeah.
and we would understand the fundamental laws of how the nature works.
Yeah.
So this is what science is all about, right? And the world of beliefs, it can be subjective, it can be relative, and it doesn't. It pursues the experienced. It doesn't pursue the experiencer in the same equation. Right? So you go after, this world is sensible. How does it work? And what's the principle behind this? So to understand the forces of nature and what is fundamental to the forces of nature, this is how it's pursuing it. The scientific inquiry is about the experienced world, right? And here in the Bhagavad Gita, what he talks about is the world of the experiencer. For example,
Sure.
in all of science, you start with, there are 3 states of matter, liquid, solid, and gas. How come you did not consider the 3 states of consciousness? Wakefulness, dream, and deep sleep. This is there in the Indic spiritual sciences, right?
Because that's part of the sensible world.
Yeah, and it is not considered. Somehow the consciousness is either dropped or it's pursued in some sense of in a partial sense. Not
what sense?
In a sense that is more like it's all from the point of view of the wakeful world. The dreams are not pursued. For example, you
in the
scientific world.
Well, I mean, one, I think they do try to study it.
Nowadays, there is some inquiry as to, but it's so subjective.
This, what I'm trying to understand, what I always am interested in is the similarities in differentiation, right? So what everything you're saying, I see in other cultures in ancient. Like, they have different terms for it, but they studied wakefulness, consciousness, subconsciousness. They just didn't have the same terms.
Right?
And they studied dream states and dreams.
Yeah, it's not part of the the religious philosophy, for that matter. There's more instructional.
I think it's in Greek or something. Like
it should be. I guess
part of.
I won't be surprised, but I don't know if it is going to be that systematic.
Maybe not systematic.
Yeah.
Sure. So that's what you're saying. You're saying that in
there
Hinduism,
is a systematic approach.
It's a real systematic approach to wakefulness, consciousness.
Yes.
And you're saying that, if I'm understanding what you're saying there's something about the approach to that that's similar to the physical external world, that both are studied and appreciated in Indian or in the Hinduism.
Yes, it is appreciated, and it's not antagonistic to scientific pursuits. There never was a Galileo who had to be persecuted, right? So, or Copernicus, for that matter, because it's that such a conflict is not there.
But were the scientists there?
Scientists
in the same way? Like, did they make the same discoveries, or? Because I know there might have been separation for a while.
Oh, yeah. It is actually so, both in terms of philosophies and sciences, yes.
Yeah.
There are many. Starting from the days of Aryabhatta, who was an astronomer.
When was that?
Between
AD?
second, probably AD, between third and fourth, around that time.
Okay, century.
Yes, yeah.
300-400 AD.
It's AD, yeah. And we have a lot of in the modern science, a lot of philosophies. For example, there are 6 philosophies that we study.
Sure.
One is the very first thing is called the Nyaya, which is epistemology and logic. It is there is both theistic and non-atheistic versions of those. It's a philosophy. And then comes Sankhya, which is followed in both herbal medicines as well as Buddhism, for that matter. Sankhya is the philosophy where consciousness is passive, and then interaction with the material world gives rise to manifested world. So that is Sankhya. And there is something called Vedanta, where it's the unifier, where self is studied, the super self, and of course there are differences between whether it is monism or qualified monism or dualism. What is the nature of reality? So it's all metaphysics there.
Yeah,
and there is another, how action is more important than passive knowledge. Mm-hmm. So therefore, there is something called as a Mimamsa. It's all about rituals. Their symbols are allegories, or I would say actions are allegories. That's going to be very interesting. Okay, it's another study.
Yeah.
Hermeneutics, probably something similar to that. And then you'll have something like Sankhya, and then we have Mimamsa and all the tantras. Tantras completely into it's all about nature, and there are specific rituals in order to subjugate nature for your needs.
Okay.
or use the energies of the world for your needs, and those kind of things. So there are various philosophies, and each major philosophy has many branches.
Sure. I mean, every culture is going to have
Yeah.
philosophy. I was trying to get at something different, but I think we'll have to, because we're running up on time. I think that we'll have, because philosophy we can go on forever and ever.
Yeah.
But I agree, like there's interesting philosophies to delve into, and
Yes.
but again, every culture has those. Every culture has stories.
Yeah. Story.
But one thing I'd like to end on is your just a little quick understanding or exploration of your origins with the Mahabharata for you personally. Did you watch it when you were young? Did you come to it later? Was it part of your growing up, or what was it?
No, when I was young, probably like 2 or 3 years old, and I've been listening to these stories. So,
But how did where are you from?
I am from part of from South India, a city called Bengaluru.
Okay.
These are our bedtime stories.
Yeah, so you got them all the time.
All the time.
It's like on the wall. You had
Yes, and then there are comic books. That's how I started.
so you started with comic books?
Comic books and small story books.
Yeah.
They were about either Ramayana or Mahabharata.
Yeah.
And of course, Bhima was very interesting for us. And
everybody likes the strong man.
yeah, and every example that we get on how should you concentrate, you should concentrate like Arjuna. Oh, because he concentrates like on the vulture.
The
eye of the
That's a great
bird.
example. Yeah, of like, and then there's the counter examples of I'm looking at, So there's a big archery moment.
Yes, and then Drona asks other 5 brothers and everybody else. They are seeing everything, the whole world.
Yeah, exactly. Like the branches, my hand, my brothers, the cloud above, and it's like, get out of here. Yeah. And then Arjuna is like, I see the bird. No, wait, I see the eye.
Yes.
And then shoots, and he hits.
So this was
an
an example.
Yeah, of great focus.
Focus.
Yeah, it's a great
focus, and his conviction to be the best archer in the world.
Yeah.
And how he pursues it. Therefore, he is considered the hero of Mahabharata.
Yeah.
And he is also very human because he's torn, right? Yeah. He's torn between conflicts, so that's always an example. There was always an example. And then we heard about Rama in Ramayana. So he's like, there's no difference between word and action for Rama.
Okay.
What he says is word. Yeah. So these are the kind of stories that we heard growing up, and then came in '93
what I was talking about.
The TV show.
The TV show.
So we were in probably school, college. Yeah, at that time it was very popular. Yeah, in our elementary, middle schools and all that. So we watched these shows. So we grew up with listening to these stories, and it's, I don't know, if you go to a temple and you see the deity of Krishna being worshipped, and then there is the story going on right next to, there will be a lot of rituals and stuffs going on, but also there will be a part of it where you get the, instead of a sermon, there is a person who's actually telling the story.
Yeah.
So the thing is, in these stories, there was no morality is not very explicit, but it has a point of view of morality. They wouldn't say you do that, not this, you do that kind of thing, but there's always a viewpoint of morality, but it shows by examples.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think morality is much more. Or wisdom is in India is much more appreciated through the form of stories.
Yes.
Versus
the form of stories.
It's that way as well in the West, but I think it's competing, and sometimes even more so with people with PhDs.
Yeah.
That's how I think. Like I call it PhD-itis in the West, where it's like those are the wise guys. They're the wise men. Which traditionally and throughout all cultures is not the case. The person who has real depth into one very esoteric thing is not necessarily the wisest person. The person who could tell good stories, tell them well, and many of them to, help guide you in multiple areas of life, that's a wise man. But the man who can, dive deep into one subject all the way down, I think is valuable. But I think of that more as knowledge than wisdom. That's how I differentiate. But one thing I appreciate about the Indian culture is their appreciation of wisdom, which I think comes from stories more than anything.
Yes, yes, and also, I mean, not many people know that when the Renaissance, European Renaissance happened, including Voltaire and other people, they recognized this thing, and they were talking about how Pythagoras, for that matter, studied in India. So this was acknowledged by Voltaire.
Yeah.
As you know, and
I know Rousseau was a fan of
Rousseau. Yeah, and also you talked about scientists, right? So scientists, for that matter,
he's like more of a romantic.
Yeah. So if you see even the religion is approached in the in the form of direct perception, inferences, and then comes the expert knowledge. So it's called the Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Agama, the Shabda. So the epistemology is very well defined. So you really do not have an equivalent of faith or axiomatic, working axiomatically.
Well, I think you have faith, but
part of it. There is a place for that.
Depending on how you're defining faith.
Yes.
Right? Because I define faith as belief without reason. So
believing without evidence.
Or without evidence, same idea. But like that's how I think of it. So
yes, so that's why the faith,
it's across all.
Yeah, but it doesn't rule your life. It's not
it's not raised to the level of like what the Christians would do, like asceticism, where it's where it really affects. No, that's something different. But there's
a place for it.
Here's one thing, and we should end on this because we're. It's a good podcast. We're talking about a lot of good stuff, but we're doing Don Quixote for Literary Canon Club, and I really liked it when I read it in my 20s. I'm loving it reading it now in my late 30s, and partly because I'm just learning so much about the culture of Europe and Spain in 1600s, and as it's coming out of this Renaissance into this more flourishing culture all over the world. But one thing that is interesting about the Don Quixote is exactly what you're talking about, where they're dealing with this issue of like believing in something without having sufficient evidence. How do you do that? How do you do that properly? Can it go wrong? And I think with Don Quixote, it kind of goes wrong. It drives him mad. He reads all these chivalry stories, and it drives him mad in a sense. He starts acting them out. But people start questioning, well, did this ever happen? Like, did this chivalric hero actually cut off the heads of 8 giants in one swing, like it says in the story? And because he takes it literally true.
Oh, yeah.
And so the parallel is clearly Christianity and religion, right? It's like, how can we really believe what we're told 100%? And I think Cervantes' answer is, the writer, I think his answer is yes, but he's still grappling with, the perception of things and the faith of having faith in them. So I think, that's a one way, that is something I need to learn more about with Indian culture, about how they experience faith, because that's one way they're thinking about faith in Don Quixote. Like they have an inquisition where it's like, you believe in this, even if you don't believe in it, you have to tell us and you have to convince us that you believe in this religion, or we're going to burn you alive, right? Like that kind of thing. And it's like, so do they really believe in it? And then believe in what? You believe in an immaculate conception? Like, so how does that work? How do you believe in, so you're supposed to believe Jesus walked on water, but I've never seen a man walk on water. How am I supposed to believe that? So that's the faith thing. So I'm curious about the level of that. And
there's a lot of mysticism. When it comes to mysticism, yes, it does exist. Faith exists
in India.
Beliefs exist. All of that.
That's what I mean by faith. It's that kind of belief without seeing it, or seeing that it's even possible.
Yes.
Like there are things that are miraculous. I don't have to see to know that it's not miraculous. There are things that are extraordinary that I don't have to see it to know that it happens, because it's within the realm of things I've seen. Like going to the moon, I don't have to. It's not an act of faith. I don't need. I've seen rockets. I've seen different types of things. I know that there's. I've seen pictures, but I've seen actual rockets go up. So you can infer certain things that it's possible to go to the moon. So it's they went to the moon, right? I don't need to have actually been on the moon and watched them walk in order to believe it. Which I think a lot of people. This is an interesting crisis of belief and meaning that we have today. Of did they just make it all up? Is the Earth flat? And people are literally questioning really basic things because they don't literally see it. And I think to me that's a conflict between inferring from facts and faith, which has no inference to jump off of.
Yes.
Like you've never seen somebody walk on water or an immaculate, a virgin giving birth. Like that's something had to happen to have the birth happen.
Yes. And man, I know, there is the faith has a certain place. Whether or not you want people to have faith, people will have it anyway.
I think there's danger in it.
There's danger in it.
A lot of danger in it. Because someone can hijack that faith and convince you of something. Because if you don't have a basis of facts and inferring from those facts, you then anybody could say anything and you can get swept into it.
So very true.
To me, that's the danger of those types of
things. And but I think epistemology, that is, if it is taught in a systematic way, people would know how to think about it.
Oh, right? For sure. That's a whole other conversation. And I talk about that on the show a lot of like good education.
Yes.
Which to me still includes, and we'll end here, but still includes the reading of the Mahabharata because it gives you an understanding of these different cultures so that you have like almost like a menu of all these cultures that you can look at, and that is almost like climbing up a mountain to look down at, not down in the negative sense, a pejorative sense, but it just being a 50,000 foot view of all the cultures, including your own, because we often get trapped in our own cultural viewpoints and thoughts and worldviews. And to me, wisdom and good living is the ability to see out into the world and look into the future in a sense, and not literally, but I think you need that systematic education of multiple cultures. And I think epics are the best way to, because it's entertaining. It's entertaining. It is entertaining.
And they're not about do's and don'ts, but they're never prescriptive. But they're descriptive. It's there for you to find it out.
Absolutely. All right, Srini. Thanks for coming. This was fun.
It's
more interesting conversations about Mahabharata. I appreciate it.
It's been wonderful talking to you. I always wanted to talk to you. And I'm glad I got this opportunity.
Yeah, me too.
I should keep this going.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're welcome back anytime.
Sure.
Have a different conversation about something else.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.